Hello everyone, welcome back to Elder and Oak Farm. If you are new here, my name is Candace and I have a cut flower farm that I started here in very humid southern Indiana, zone 6A. And my channel has primarily shifted towards videos about the flower farm, but I also do still include a lot of things going on in my vegetable garden and my landscape and, flower beds and things like that. But in today's video, as you can see beside me here, we have some absolutely amazing, beautiful ranunculus. And on this side, I don't know if you can see, but on this side, I have some anemones tucked in back there. I also have a hoophouse right behind you, a smaller one where I had some ranunculus that I overwintered. And then I even threw some ranunculus and anemones in my raised beds this year because ranunculus are just that good. But in today's video, I want to share with you just a few things, like, the success with the ranunculus this year, what I feel I did differently and contributed to the success with the ranunculus, and just some tips to maybe help you have some of these super tall, and not just tall and thin and straggly, but tall and thick stems. These are actually some of the ones, these are some of the last ones. These have been blooming. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. Before I get into all that, I always start going on a tangent. So let me rewind a little bit. In today's video, I want to talk about what I think contributed to the huge success that I had with ranunculus and anemones this year, and talk about those things so that maybe you can also have success if you've been struggling. Because I know for 3 years I would look at these beautiful pictures on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, but then whenever I would grow them myself, I would get like super thin stems, like this little one right here that is actually attached to another one. This one wasn't fully grown yet, so it's a lot smaller, and even these are a lot smaller than a lot of the ones that I've been getting. And I would see, tiny buds like this. And these are actually like at the end of their life. That's why you see so many of them here. This is not what a flower farmer wants to see. We want to pick these before they get to this point so that we can sell them, because once they get to this point, they don't last as long in a vase. They've already, been blooming out here for a few days once they get to this point. And these have been blooming for a while now. So they're at the last, the last little bit of their life, and it's getting very hot here in southern Indiana. Today is May 27th, and I'm honestly surprised that they've been blooming this long, but I think because they are in a hoop house with a shade cloth, that has helped extend it a little bit. But they've been blooming since, well, the ones behind you started blooming first, and then these started blooming. I'll put the dates up because I have it written down exactly when they started to bloom. I don't want to say the wrong dates, but I feel like they've been blooming at least for 6 weeks. And a lot of the times ranunculus, depending on how fast it gets hot, it's usually around 4 weeks is what I hear from other people. But anyways, these are at the last of their life before they go dormant. So these stems are not even as tall and as thick as I have been getting. I've been getting ranunculus, the buds, like they're as big as peony buds. And the stems, whenever I would see people growing them in a hoop house with shade cloth, I would always think, especially, if you kind of seen them curve like this one actually only curved because it was so tall that it fell over and then started, going back up. But I would see them like this and think, oh, they're really, thin and leggy, and that's why they're so tall. Like, you don't want that in a vase. But I'm telling you, these stems, actually, let me cut one for you that is like more of a better representation of the stems that I've been getting. Do you see how tall this thing is? And it's not super floppy. And even this one is on the thinner side. 1 second. This is more closer to the stems that I've been getting. They've all had multiple side shoots. They've all sent up multiple stems. If you've watched any of my last few videos, you'll know several of them have been about Ranunculus Anemones. I haven't really had time to share so far this year, you know, planting things in the cut flower farm and things like that, which I apologize. But I'm doing a much larger farmers market this year, and so far it's been absolutely great. But I've also been super busy. I did have to go back to work full time until my sales got better. But anyways, in my last couple videos, I talked about all of the varieties. In one of the last couple videos, I talked about all of the varieties that I grew. And one of the things that I was worried about was for the ones that I got from Eden Brothers, the corms were super, super tiny. And with varieties like the Aviv that I tried to grow for several years and have now come to realize that that was part of the problem, was the Aviv are not really good for cut flowers. Their stems are just not tall, like they're not tall enough, they're not strong enough, and they only have one set of petals. So the good thing with these, since they're so, you know, full and double, is, you know, say you get a little bug bite, you can just pull that one off. But if you get a bug bite on the Aviv variety, you know, you're going to be taking off like a fifth of your flower, and I don't think people are going to like that very much. So I did get some aphid issues here in this hoop house, and I think because like the airflow wasn't as good, and aphids usually come out like super early in the season when the ladybugs aren't here yet and things like that. But it wasn't too bad to where I had to spray or anything like that. I still you know, just didn't use those flowers, and I didn't have an issue. And now it's warmer and the ladybugs are out, and I see them in here munching them all up. So here in a second, I will go out there in my raised beds and I will get a couple of the Aviv to show you an example. But before I forget, and before my husband comes back, I want to talk about a couple things. So this video was kind of like spur of the moment. I was planning to do this video, and you know, I had this long list of things that I wanted to talk about. But he went, and you know, when you have a kid-free moment, you want to hurry up and get some things done, and this is one of the things that I was like, let me do this real quick, because I was already out here harvesting. So one thing that I wanted to talk about was the varieties. So like I said, I already talked about the varieties that I grew. Oh, back to the corm size. Let me finish there, sorry. So the corm size was very concerning because the Avivs that I was used to are super huge compared to the ones that I got from Eden Brothers. But amazingly, the, you know, one single small corm from Eden Brothers produced probably triple of the amount of stems that the Avivs, and I'm pointing over there because they're over there, but at least triple the amount of stems that the Aviv varieties sent up. And again, taller, stronger stems. And then another thing that I've noticed is they last a lot longer, which probably has, you know, a lot to do with the fact that they're double. But the Aviv, like like as soon as it got to the point where it was ready to be cut, if I didn't cut it like at that moment, excuse me, if I didn't cut it like at that moment, like even later, you know, a couple hours later, I would come out and it would seem like they were already dropping petals. But these, it's like they don't blow open and start losing petals near as quickly. And you know, even if you harvest them a little bit more open, they would still last a good 7-8 days in a vase. They can last up to usually 10 to 12 days is like maximum that I've seen people talk about. And I usually get like 10 days max if I harvest them at the perfect stage. But what I like is, like I said, even if you don't harvest them at the perfect stage, you still get 7 or 8 days, which is, you know, plenty good for a bouquet, especially when, you know, florists or grocery stores that don't buy their flowers local, you know, you're lucky to get 4 or 5 days out of a vase. So that's another great benefit to these varieties. Now, if you didn't watch my last couple videos, I do recommend you go back and, you know, see exactly how I pre-sprouted them and how I, you know, planted them and all of that. But I did just want to quickly go over what I did for these in particular is I pre-sprouted them early this spring, or maybe it was late winter. I'll put the date on the screen. Pre-sprouted them, and then one thing that I did differently this year, which Nicole used to do at Flower Hill Farm, and she doesn't do it anymore, she now does what I used to do, which is to grow them in plug trays instead of the open, like no cell bottom germination trays. I grew them in plug trays, and I liked that because they kept the roots contained. As long as you don't wait way too long to transplant them, and you transplant them when they're needed to be transplanted, then they don't get root bound and things like that. It was perfect for me here in my clay soil. Even though I have like inches and inches of compost that I put on these beds, it just washes away, unfortunately, eventually, because here in southern Indiana we just get like golly washers, and like so many inches come down at once, and then it floods and it washes it away. So they having the clay soil, it's very difficult to dig a hole. I can't just like use my hand like some people to dig a hole and put it in there. I wish I could do that, but I have to like use a little trowel, and then it comes out in a big old like brick, and then I have to like dice it up with my little trowel and try to get it in small enough pieces to where once I put the plant in, I can cover it up, and like there's not a bunch of holes from these big chunks of dirt. It doesn't just like crumble, and it's very clay. So having that little root ball was very beneficial to me. But Nicole, she doesn't do that any longer because she likes how the roots are able to spread out. But I don't want to have to dig a hole this deep or this wide just to get my ranunculus in the ground. So that's something different that I did this year, which may or may not have contributed to the success. I think it was mainly the varieties, but I also think that this hoop house had a lot to do with it. Last year I tried planting some in a like a DIY caterpillar tunnel, and it just wasn't holding enough of the heat in, and I was having issues with it. So a lot of my corms rotted, and I had to reorder, and I did plant them a little bit later than I planted these. So that also might be why I didn't have as much success last year. But I do think that planting them at the right time and planting them in this hoop house had a very, very big part in why I also had success. Because the key to growing ranunculus, you have to plant them late enough to where it's not going to have, like a hard freeze and freeze the corms and the foliage that is already growing. But you have to plant them early enough to where they're ready to bloom like they are now, before you have consistently 70-degree temperatures. So if you're just like, oh, I'm going to wait, a couple weeks after my last frost. Well, if you're anything like southern Indiana, our last frost was 4 weeks ago. So here it is 4 weeks later, and we're already in the mid 80s. So that would have only given them 4 weeks, and they need 60 to 90 days to bloom. So they would have started blooming way too early and been on short little stubby stems, or they may not have bloomed at all, and they might have just like started to turn yellow and died back, and started to go dormant. Because if you don't know, ranunculus and anemones, they can handle the heat more than the ranunculus. But the ranunculus are very sensitive to the heat, and once you have consistent degrees over 70, and it has to be consistent. If you have just a couple 70-degree temperatures, or even 80, like we've had a few 80-degree temperatures in these last like 2 or 3 weeks, and it cooled back down to like 68 or 74, and fluctuated, so it wasn't consistent. So they didn't go dormant. But now the last few days it's been very hot, and I assume that these are gonna be, I'm gonna walk out here one day and they're gonna be all yellow and dying back and going dormant. So I'm glad I was able to get this video out for you guys. Let's think, what else did I want to talk about? I know that I'm probably forgetting some things, so if I remember them, I'll maybe type them up in the comments. So make sure you check the comments. But I can't think of anything else that I wanted to talk about. Just mainly, you got to find that sweet spot. And it's taken me 3 years to find that I need the right varieties, and I need to find that sweet spot of when to plant them to where it's not too soon, but it's not too late. And then again, the hoop house helps me to be able to plant them a little bit earlier. And that is another thing that I did. The hoop house wasn't quite enough to keep it over 28 degrees. Like, I think I planted them whenever our temperatures was getting down to like 24 still at night. And so we had the hoop house, and then I also laid a couple layers of frost cloth over them when I first planted them. I think I just planted like the chamallow, and then waited a couple days, planted the bonbon, and waited a couple days. That way, if we did have a really cold night that, sometimes the weather says it's only going to get down to 24, but then it gets down to 20. That way I wouldn't lose them all. So I planted them in chunks. But I do know that we had some nights like 24, maybe even a little lower. And so I did put the extra frost cloth on them. So I did plant them around those types of temperatures. And then after like a couple weeks, they have just been in the hoop house. And then about a month ago, I put, whenever they were like just starting to bloom, I put the shade cloth on. I've been picking these very hard for the last 4 weeks. At first I was just getting a couple blooms here and there, and then they just like burst with a ton of blooms about 4 weeks ago, and I've just been steadily picking off of them every week. Now I only do the farmers market every other week. On the week that I don't do the farmers market, I've been thankfully having other customers buy bouquets from me. Like Mother's Day was not last week but the week before, and I had a super successful Mother's Day this year, which I'm thankful for. But this past week, let's think, let me see. Okay, I had the farmers market last week. The week before that was Mother's Day, and I didn't have the farmers market. So this weekend, today's Saturday, I don't have the farmers market. So yeah, so that's why there's so many blooms right now, because I didn't pick this past Thursday, a couple days ago. But usually, you know, you wouldn't see all these blooms, and I'm not gonna, I don't have that many orders this week, so that's why I'm only harvesting a few. But yeah, so I think that's all that I wanted to go over. Again, look in the comments. And also, if you have any tips, or if you've had any success and you have any ideas as to what helped you have success, let me and everyone else know in the comments. I'm sure everyone would love to hear it. I know everyone wants to grow these beautiful things. Oh, I didn't show you the other Ranunculus Anemones. So let me show you that real quick. And I also didn't give you a closer look at these gorgeous Ranunculus. Look how large these blooms are. And like these are all, excuse me, and these are all like really small compared to what I've been getting. I don't know if it's because they're about to go dormant, but I still have some big ones coming on too. Like, look at that. Look how big that is. Wow, look at that. That is perfection. Well, it's not perfection. It has a couple bruises on the petals because of that, but I mean, like, look at that. Wow, that is gorgeous. And this is the pastel Amandine mix. I got a couple that weren't so pastel, but most of them have been pastel. And then, let's see, these are still the Amandine mix, I believe. Let me look at the tag and make sure. This one's kind of spent, but this has also been one of my favorite that has like the yellow on the edges. Kind of looks similar to that other one, but not so much. That darker pink. And then this one is another one that's been a favorite. This one is like a purple and white Picotee one. Like, just look at how large that is. And then I think we're getting into the marshmallow now. Yeah, these are the marshmallow. And these are very old. Like, these probably bloomed right after I harvested last Thursday. I usually will deadhead, maybe 3 or 4 days before I'm going to harvest. But I just didn't get out here this past week to do that. And then this, the Shamallow. It is so, so gorgeous. It has that green center and the very, very pale pink petals. I will throw more pictures up, if I'm not already, of what some of these look like, when they're not like totally blown out. They have like a, it's hard to explain, like it has like a yellow undertone to some of them. It's hard to explain. Hopefully you can see in some of the pictures that I pop up. Like, see, that one looks like more of a like creamy white with just the most pale pink. And I'm starting to get a lot of weeds in here now that they're starting to like fall over and, now that they're starting to like fall over and die back and go dormant. But like, see how they're falling over like that? It's because their stems have just been so amazingly long. And look, that is not a super skinny stem. It's because I let this open up too much and then it got too heavy and fell over. But if you harvest it, you know, in the bud stage like you're supposed to, then they don't do that. You can see like a lot of these are still standing up. Even these that are, you know, pretty heavy. Like, look at how long that is. That's longer than my arm. That comes up to like right below my hip. Absolutely amazing. You should have seen me when I first came out here. I think I might have a video. Yes, I did. I posted a video of me and my son in the other hoop house. You might want to check that out. Where I was like, oh my gosh, look at the freaking stem length. But now let's take a look at the anemones. Look at these beauties. Now this here is a rainbow mix that I got from Jake from the group Post Sales for the Small Scale Grower. And then over here I have some rarities right here, and then some of these are the first crush mix from, I believe, Eden Brothers. And yeah, and then those are from rare easy to grow bulbs. One of the things that I love most about anemones, I actually don't like love the shape of these flowers, but I absolutely love this velvety purple center that they have. And I love the way they look when they're more closed. I don't know what it is, but when they're like this, or like this, or a little bit, you know, more closed than that. I don't know what it is, but I just love that. All right, and then here are my 4 raised beds that are supposed to be for vegetables. And I have this German chamomile that has been reseeding like crazy, and it's been very hard to control. So what I did is I went ahead and just let it bloom in this bed, and it actually really worked out, because what happened is I even have some potatoes coming back from last year that I guess we missed, even though my son was in here like every day after digging the potatoes for like 2 months trying to find more. But what had happened was we had the anemones pop up through, that was so ugly, probably gonna cut that out. But we had the anemones pop up through the chamomile, and it made the stems kind of elongate a little bit. So yeah, that actually worked out. But you can see like these are pretty old and not looking the greatest. But yeah, and then this is what our rain does. It makes everything fall over. That's why I've actually went through and harvested a bunch of it, and I'm gonna dry some and try to do a couple things with some dried chamomile. I'm doing a lot more herbs this year as well. But anyways, here is the Aviv ranunculus, and this is what happens. They have 1, maybe 2 layers of petals, and they lose them very quickly. Like, see this here? If one of these gets any bug damage on it, you know, you can't pull that off, because then this one's actually pretty full compared to most of them. And then see, this is what the stems look like. They're super thin, super fragile. Now the last thing before I go that I want to tell you about is what I did to amend all of these beds. I amended the beds very well with blood meal and bone meal. I give that to all of my beds at the beginning of each season, and then in addition to that, every time I transplant anything throughout the season, I also use Espoma's Biotone starter fertilizer. And then because ranunculus are such heavy feeders, for about the first month and a half, I went in weekly with a fish emulsion fertilizer. And that's all the fertilizer and amending that these ranunculus and anemones got for their entire growing period. But that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully it was helpful. I know I probably left a few things out, but if it was helpful in any way, or you just enjoyed looking at the beautiful ranunculus, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if Tanya from Tanya with the Flowers ever happens to watch this, I just want to say thank you, because if it wasn't for you and your videos, then I would never be having any of the success that I'm having. your views of your ranunculus are just so dreamy, and I've wanted that for years, and I feel like I'm finally have achieved it. But that's it for this video, you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.